Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Talithia Vest, and I'm the New Jersey president for the National Association of African Americans in Human Resources, and we're thrilled to have you join us. Welcome to part 2 of NAR New Jersey's In the Know webinar series, a set of complimentary bite-sized learning sessions highly focused on hot topics in HR. Today's topic is Building an Effective Diversity Strategy, led by Morgan Lewis partner and Diversity Committee co-chair, Larry Turner. For those of you new to NAR, NAR is a national association made up of 4,000 members and affiliates and operates in over 35 chapters and interest groups throughout the nation. We're highly committed to expanding the presence and leadership abilities and minority talent at all levels across all industries, both nationally and globally. And the mission of NAR New Jersey is to be the premier HR professional organization that strengthens top talent, provides value-added services, and cares about the community, all in a way that grows New Jersey-based businesses and supports the development of minorities in HR. Our vision is simple: help people do their best every day. So know that our programming calendar, conferences, symposiums, and networking events, all the activity that we do is intended to support that vision. With that said, we certainly would not be able to provide the In the Know webinar series if it weren't for our sponsor, Universum. So I want to make sure to acknowledge and thank them for their support in being the webinar platform that we're currently using. With that said, I want to introduce you to a fellow board member, Heather Roth, who's the Vice President of Programming for our chapter and leads the calendar and events that take place. And Heather will introduce today's guest speaker. Heather?
Hi everyone, my name is Heather Ross, and as Talithia just said, I'm the co-vice president of programming for NAR New Jersey. It's my pleasure today to introduce our speaker, Mr. Larry L. Turner. Mr. Turner is a partner in Morgan Lewis's Labor and Employment Practice and co-chair of the firm's Diversity Committee. Mr. Turner's practice focuses on employment litigation, including nationwide FLSA collective action cases, single and class action plaintiff cases involving federal and state anti-discrimination, wrongful termination, restrictive covenants, and trade secrets. He has worked extensively with pharmaceutical and medical device companies, as well as the fast food industry and financial institutions. Mr. Turner has tried numerous cases to verdict in state and federal courts involving a variety of employment litigation matters, as well as commercial and catastrophic personal injury cases. He is a frequent speaker on employment-related topics, including enforcing non-compete covenants, independent contractor issues, and avoiding risk associated with diversity programs. He also counsels employers on how to avoid litigation. Mr. Turner was listed as a Pennsylvania super lawyer employment litigation in 2007, 2008, and 2009. We are very happy and pleased that he's able to present on diversity to us this morning, and I would like to turn it over to Mr. Larry Turner.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Larry Turner, and I bring you all greetings from sunny Philadelphia. I'm happy to report that because it has been anything but sunny for the past few days. It's a little chilly, but a nice day overall. I'm very excited to have an opportunity to speak with you about the issue of diversity and keeping you guys in the know. Today, in particular, because this issue is near and dear to my heart in my role as co-chair of my firm's Global Diversity Committee, as well as the fact that I've spent over 2 decades defending clients in litigation because of missteps, for the most part, often based on good intentions gone awry. My goal today is to help you to avoid, at least in the initial steps, ending up in the quicksand that can be diversity and inclusion if you're not careful, but at the same time helping to motivate you to do and continue to do the creative work that you do in this space to make your respective workforces better for us all. Now, as we talk today, I'm going to touch upon several topics, but this is a brief overview of some of the things that we're going to cover as quickly as we can, but as thoroughly as we can, in a way to at least arm you with some preliminary things to think about as you move forward. We're going to start with defining diversity and why it's important. Then I will spend some time talking with you about the reasons to adopt diversity initiatives. Now, many of you may say, well, okay, we've already got the reasons. That's why we're listening to the program. Well, believe it or not, folks, even today there are still naysayers out there. And as your particular diversity and inclusion program moves along the path that you will outline for it or have outlined for it, and it evolves, different reasons may become important to you, and more importantly, may resonate with your audience. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on that as well. I'm also going to talk about some of the legal restrictions on diversity initiatives. I do that, or I will do that, in an effort to arm you with a framework within which you can be creative. And so that when and if you have to interact either with your legal department or outside counsel, you can make sure that your conversation stays out of that category that most people associate with my colleagues in this space, and that is the lawyers always say no. I'm going to make sure that you can say, hopefully by the end of this presentation, there are lawyers out there who will say yes, but you just have to be creative and well-grounded in how to get there. Then I'm going to spend a few moments talking with you about a few lawful diversity initiatives. Now, keep in mind that these examples are setting the floor, not the ceiling. There are only a few examples to give you something to start with for those of you who have not embarked upon creating your own diversity and inclusion initiative, but at the same time serving as additional examples for those of you that have of ways that you may further refine some of the things that you're doing. Using diversity data and tracking results, in my view, for this presentation is where the rubber meets the road. That is the one topic that I strongly suggest that you pay very, very, very close attention to, because that, in my view, is where most companies make mistakes that are very costly. And last but not least, I want to make sure that you keep your eye on the global diversity issue, because it is something of which you should be aware. And with that, let's get to the heart of the matter. And we have our first polling question.
Heather, this is Johan again from Universum. It looks like you're still on mute, so please unmute yourself and proceed.
I apologize for that once again. So our first polling question is, where is your organization in its diversity journey? We'd like you to select one of the following: very early stage, building awareness; on the way, building and developing strategy and competence; up and running, diversity is embraced at all levels. On your screen, participants, you should have an option to select, and the results so far, so of those on the call, it looks like 67% is building awareness at the very early stage, and about a third are up and running. Diversity is embraced at all levels.
Very good. With that, which that's very impressive and encouraging, because most of the missteps that occur in the D&I space occur with companies not building the programs or the initiatives correctly. And as my children tell me, usually when I ask one question, it leads to another, and that's what's going to happen here. I think it's time for the next polling question.
So our second polling question, has your organization defined diversity? Yes, no, or unsure? So for this poll result of has your organization defined diversity, about 1/3 has said yes, and about 2/3, 67%, have said no.
Once again, we're off to a great start. I'm very pleased, both from the standpoint of the variety and the diversity of the people on the line with respect to the experience and the stage at which you are gaining knowledge on how to build the program, because question number 2 and question number 1 are probably two of the most important that you will have to answer as we move forward. And let's start with, what is diversity today? Defining diversity. Traditionally, when I was growing up, and I'm happy to say that I'm no longer the youngest kid on the block, race was the big issue in the United States from the standpoint of diversity. If you could walk into your office space and see someone who was not in the majority, your office space was most likely considered to be diverse. Well, today that's not the case. Today we're looking at a wide variety of characteristics, those that are visible as well as those that are invisible. And they range from sexual orientation to race to work experience, hobbies, home ownership, working style, and the list goes on. Here are a few examples on the screen now. The key, however, particularly for those of you who are just beginning to build your programs and thinking about how to go about this, and even for those of you who have been up and running for a little while, you may want to make sure that regardless of the precision of your definition, you need to make sure that it is clear and that your company is comfortable with your definition. Clarity is essential because it is what the outside world will see as your first introduction into the D&I space. Your future workforce, your recruiters and those that you're trying to recruit, are going to look to you how you define diversity to determine whether or not they want to become engaged in the conversation with you at all. It's also important from the standpoint of it will set the standard by which your existing workforce will likely judge your efforts, which directly impacts or will impact your retention goals and aspirations. So spend some time getting the definition of diversity for your particular organization right. Again, it should be clear, whatever it is, make sure it's clear, and it should be a definition with which your company is comfortable. That leads us to why adopt diversity initiatives in the first place. For many of you, you're probably going through that conversation, and I'm putting that in air quotes, right now. You are probably seeing for the first time, though maybe not tremendously or terribly vocally, but you sense and feel the lack of or positive response to some of the things that you're trying to do. The naysayers exist. Even though we're in an age where we have an African American president who is in his second term, yes, the naysayers are still out there. The significance of the reasons for you, however, go beyond just the historical. They go to the fact that you will need to, from time to time, either to yourselves, to those to whom you're looking for support, or for those that you're trying to attract to your efforts or your company, you're going to need to justify what you're doing. And you need to constantly evaluate the reasons why you're doing what you're doing. Here are a few of the benefits that have surfaced in my experience over time. Studies have now shown repeatedly that diversity improves a company's bottom line. They've also shown that diversity creates a better workplace. Diversity, again, comes in a variety of formats, including a diversity of ideas. Now, that may not and most likely will not be your aspirational goal in putting together your D&I program, but keep that in mind. Generally accepted in today's society is that diversity is a business and moral imperative. And I say generally because there are pockets out there that are not convinced of that yet. And we see it every day. So you need to be mindful of that and look for ways to continue to and be prepared to offer that rationale and response if need be. It's confirmed that diversity is a critical factor in the recruitment and retention of a talented workforce. From my perspective, wearing my litigation hat, diversity programs have been very, very useful in helping me show a variety of governmental agencies as well as plaintiffs, lawyers, that my clients are in compliance with the legal requirements in this space. Very important to have a viable diversity program in place should you ever be caught between the crosshairs of a very well-funded plaintiff. Litigation has also shown that good efforts without a well-thought-out plan for your diversity initiative can spell disaster. Support for your program will come into question, as well as the resulting litigation exposure. Well, you may ask yourself, well, if I'm going to have to continue to justify this to my business people, why bother? Here's some of the reasons why you may, in talking with both your business people and as you work through your list of reasons that you're doing what you do, say, you know, it is worthwhile. Let's start with the increased governmental scrutiny that's now being placed on issues stemming from diversity and inclusion. For just a moment, OC over the last 4 years has focused on systemic litigation initiatives in a major way. And by systemic litigation initiatives, I'm talking about class action, very, 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 very large company-wide and industry-wide pieces of litigation. They're able to do so now because they're better funded and because the personnel that they have working for them now is more sophisticated in how to bring those matters. They have made it a part of their stated mission, their 8-year plan, to increase the number of class action and systemic type cases that they pursue because they want to have an industry or company-wide impact on what they're doing. Now, that does not mean that they're no longer pursuing individual plaintiffs' cases, but what it does mean is that you as employers need to be smart about and watching those cases in the same way that the EEOC is doing. Gone are the days where if you have one complaint in Kalamazoo, Michigan, you can no longer think about what effect or whether or not it will be linked with a case that you may have in Plano, Texas, because the EEOC is certainly looking at that because they're looking for patterns and common issues that might afford them an opportunity to go beyond just that one case. In addition, the OFCCT has received increased funding and is focusing more on compensation claims and disability claims, particularly with the passing of the Equal Pay Act. For those of you outside of the financial industry, you may not be familiar with the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, but clearly those of you who are in the financial industry are familiar with it. But because of the length of the act, you may not realize that there's one section in that act which takes, I think, maybe 1,000 pages or so, if not more. It's Section 342, in which, or 362, excuse me, in which even there is a focus on diversity. In that act, those of you involved in the financial industry know that the various government agencies responsible for regulating your industry are now charged with identifying an OMRI director who will be responsible for making sure that not only the governmental agencies that regulate the financial industry, but the financial industry as a whole becomes more diverse. For those of you outside of the financial industry, This has ramifications for you as well because the Act also provides the OMBU Director with the responsibility of making sure that independent contractors who contract with those companies who are regulated by the financial regulators are also pursuing responsible and legitimate diversity goals. So keep that in mind. And if you've not taken a look at the Dodd-Frank Act, you should do so, particularly Section 362. Also, let's move away. Let's take a step beyond the governmental interest. Increased workforce scrutiny and awareness has grown exponentially over the last several years. I don't think any of us can pick up a magazine or trade journal that doesn't have a reference at some point to some company being identified as an employer of choice or the best employer for, you fill in the blank, women, African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, you name it. Even the politicians have joined the fray. Some of you may be familiar with the senator from New Jersey, Robert Menendez, who issues a corporate diversity survey and has done so quite effectively, I might add, to, I think it's the top 100 companies or corporations in the country. Now, let's take a very brief look at the legal restrictions on diversity initiatives. I'm not going to give you a bunch of legal theory here. Hopefully this is going to be pretty plain and straight, because one of the things that I have found in this area particularly, it can be so charged with the emotions and historical aspects of some of the issues that you will face, that to cover it in legalese takes away from what you're trying to do. So what I've done is twofold. I'm going to show you two slides here. One is my attempt at a chart to kind of lay out some of the basic legal framework for this area. And the second is a narrative slide that skips the diagram and goes right into the overall language. Remedial preferences would be the category of initiative that we'll start with here. And generally, they can be lawful only to remedy actual discrimination. Let me share with you here and now that remedial preferences, in the eyes of the court, a justifiable remedial preference is rare, extremely rare. So most of you will not fall into that category. The next one listed would be a voluntary affirmative action type diversity goal related to either race or gender, and it being acknowledged as a factor in a selection decision. That can only be done lawfully where there's a manifest imbalance in traditionally segregated jobs. Well, some of you will say, well, that's obvious. No, not so. Not so. Again, extremely rare. That category could also be commonly referred to as quotas. You'll also see the third from the top is the OFCCP, Affirmative Action Plan reference. And that's probably most familiar to those of you who do a lot of government contracting work. Again, race and gender cannot play a role in the decisions there. Most of you should focus on the last category there, aspirational goals. They're lawful, but race and gender cannot play a role in your employment decisions. That includes hiring, retention, and promotion. Let's look at this information in a different way. I'll just give you a quick minute to take a look at that. I'm not going to read the slide to you because I think you get the gist of where I'm going with this. But let's focus on things that you should consider when being creative about the goals that you're going to put into place or you have in place with your D&I programs. The first thing that I want you to remember, if you take nothing else from our time together today, is that unrealistic goals And no, this isn't the record skipping here. It's me repeating it. Unrealistic goals are your fastest way to trouble in this space. Here are a few reasons why. They can be used in litigation to argue your true lack of commitment to diversity, believe it or not. Moreover, your failure to meet specific goals, realistic or not, will be used as evidence of discrimination in a class action. And it's significant there because keep in mind that most of the decisions that you make in the D&I space will affect more than one employee. Even if you're only focused on one employee in Kansas City on this given day, that decision most likely will have an effect on every other employee in your company, wherever you may be located. Failure to meet specific targets can be evidence of the company's knowledge of discrimination. And last but not least, the bullet point at the end is one that we're going to come back to again and again. And that is with respect to language. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the discussions that you will have in this space already come enveloped with a layer of emotion that you're going to have to figure out a way within your respective company to deal with in a creative way that is constructive. It is crucial in this space, absolutely crucial, that you manage your messaging surrounding what you're doing, whether it be with your diversity professional, your HR professional, your marketing person, your legal representative. All of you must be on the same page when it comes to messaging. The use of terms like shortfalls or comparators could be extremely dangerous. Now, what I'd like to do is to identify for you a few diversity initiatives that have received the blessing of various courts over the years, but understand this list and the things about which I'm going to speak now. The list is not exhaustive. I'm only providing a floor for you to go out and, in the context of your specific company, think about how either these initiatives or others that you feel might be more appropriate for the opportunities within your company can be put into action, while at the same time keeping the risks of resulting litigation at a minimum. The methods that we're going to be talking about, for the most part, will fall into three buckets. The first will be the applicant pool, then expanding the inclusiveness of your work environment, as well as improving the accountability of your managers. And I want to take a step back here. In my years of working in this space, I have found that the low-hanging fruit, if you will, stems from the ability of an employer, whether it be my own or those that I am advising or counseling, to attract and increase the size of the applicant pool, and do so in such a way that reaps the following benefits. One, encourages new blood into your company, new blood that is diverse and reflective of the diverse workforce that you're trying to either create, maintain, or enhance. It also sends a very powerful message to those who are already in your company that you take the D&I issues that you have raised with them seriously, and you're trying to get things done. It also sends a message to those communities in which you are conducting business or hope to do business, again, that you're serious about what you're saying. The trick, as we all know, or those of us who've been in this space for a while, is maintaining that momentum once you get it started with the applicant pool. And we'll talk more about that. With respect to enhancing and expanding aspects of your inclusive environment, the key word in that point is inclusive. The key word is inclusive. What you don't want to do is to either promote or encourage the exclusion of anyone. Remember that the whole purpose behind a lot of what we're doing and what you will be doing in the future is to provide opportunities to those to whom opportunities have not been there in the past. So you want to make sure that you cannot provide the naysayers with an opportunity to say, well, you are excluding me. So make sure that your battle cry is one of being inclusive. And last but not least, despite all the lofty and very heartfelt statements that will come out of your efforts and great goals that I'm sure all of you will articulate as time goes by in your D&I efforts, make sure that the people who are actually on the ground floor that have to make this happen, your managers, buy into what you're selling from a D&I perspective, and you figure out a way within your company structure to make them accountable for moving the needle forward. If you don't, in my experience, it is going to be very difficult for you to make any progress in your space. Those line managers, those guys who, and ladies who are on the ground making the hiring decisions and promotion decisions, they are where you need to spend a lot of your time getting them both up to speed and buying into whatever initiatives and programs you're going to be promoting for them. Okay, let's start with the pool. One of the areas, as I mentioned earlier, that is low-hanging fruit, if you will, is just getting the word out that there's an opportunity there. Very often, companies forget how important it is to just be seen as being fair about job postings and notifications. A simple way to address this is to make sure that you post all positions up to a certain level, and that level will be determined by what is appropriate for your particular company. And consider, if you will, and this is something that I think is catching on more and more, an expression of interest system. And in essence, what it is you giving your employees an opportunity to articulate what their goals are within the company. For example, you may have a bright young person in your mailroom who desires to be a corporate VP one day. Now, many might say, well, okay, that's nice, but until you engage that person in conversation, you may or may not know that he or she is a student at Stanford. They are an economics major, and lo and behold, this diverse person in your mailroom is doing pretty well and has a goal of obtaining his or her MBA as well as their undergraduate degree within a certain period of time, and truly has the capability and the substance to not only be a manager or an officer within your company, but possibly running the company one day. You may never know that, and more importantly, you may treat that person differently if you take the time to find out what their interest is with respect to being affiliated with your particular company. Expression of interest programs have been very, very, very rewarding, not only for companies, but for the employees who, even if they leave the company, have found that in building those relationships, they always have some degree of loyalty to the company that took the time to listen to what they had to say. So please keep that in mind. The other thing with respect to posting positions and getting the word out, if you will, about opportunities within your company, this area gives you an opportunity to take a look at how you go about spreading the word about opportunities in your company. For example, if you're working in a company that has a stated goal of diversifying its workforce, but it only advertises promotion opportunities, let's say, in a Vermont yachting club on Wednesdays at noon, and then 6 months later questions the results that it has received, you may wonder, well, or ask, why don't you reconsider where you are spreading the word about these opportunities? Again, asking the right questions in this space is very, very helpful from the standpoint of getting to know not only what you are doing, but what your employees are looking for and expecting from you. Increasing diversity, internal and external applicant pool strategies is another way of going about it. It is lawful and just as appropriate as the sun rising each day for you to require diverse applicant slates. Make sure that you're talking to your recruiters, whether they be your internal recruiters or external vendors with whom you've contracted, to provide your managers with candidate slates that include qualified, diverse candidates whenever possible. Require your managers to provide an explanation before the selection if a diverse candidate is interviewed but not selected. Now, you will note that I've highlighted the phrase before selection. Why? He or she is he or she or black or white or Asian, but probing whether or not they have considered all the various qualifications for the job and the qualifications that they are considering match the job to be performed, you will find that you will get a more diverse response and selection as you go, as opposed to waiting until after the decision has been made and then attempting to point fingers, or creating an environment that suggests that no matter how many candidates may be offered, candidates of a certain type will never get a position in that space. There are other legal reasons for that, but for our purposes today, we'll save that for another discussion. But for the purpose of advancing your D&I goals, if you can work it into your hiring process to have those conversations before the decision is actually made, or even the interviews take place, that would be a good time to have it with your managers to make sure that you're getting a reflective flow through the interview and actual hiring decision stage. Leadership and talent development programs are another great place for diversity and inclusion efforts to focus early on. Most companies today identify and develop high potential talent routinely. What they don't do is make sure that those who are afforded those opportunities are diverse. Again, your goal here is to be inclusive, not exclusive. Similarly with structured mentoring and career development programs, while you can make sure that there is an increased effort to include a wider variety of folks, your goal should not be to exclude anyone. Again, include as many people as possible who have the qualifications and have demonstrated that they have what you're looking for to move to the next level as your leaders within your particular company. I want to circle back to recruiting efforts because, again, that is one area where you can have immediate impact right off the bat and build some momentum for your program in a variety of ways. Internships for high school and college students, I think, is going to be a tremendous focus within the next 5 to 10 years in particular. Some of you may be aware of the pending and recent litigation stemming from colleges and universities and the projections with respect to the number of minority students who are now attending colleges and universities. To make a long story short, they're down in some areas. That does not mean that they will be down forever, but in order to keep the pipeline robust, Many companies are using this as an opportunity to make sure that their brands are associated with the efforts to repopulate those pipelines by establishing relationships with high schools and colleges so that they can help in any way possible to keep that pipeline as robust as possible. Traditionally, one way of doing it has been partnerships with historically black and female colleges, still a very viable option. But don't forget that you can also partner with diverse organizations in majority educational institutions, institutions at which your companies may already have an established relationship, but just aren't looking beyond Thurston Howell III. Reach out to the diverse student organizations that are now on every major college campus and make sure that they are included in the students that you're interviewing when you're on campus and are lending support to those organizations as you think about your charitable and other giving there. What you're trying to do is to keep in place the reasoning that has undercut a statement that I'm sure many of you have heard over the years is, we can't find any. Well, right now, that is very, very difficult to say with any degree of credibility because there are diverse candidates in just about every discipline you can think of. Now, the question is whether or not we are able to continue that pipeline of talent moving forward. But as of now, it's still there, and you want to make sure that it stays there. And one of the ways to gain a great deal of credibility for your company and your efforts is to engage in partnerships of this type. If you're looking at trying to make an impact and your focus is not necessarily on junior entry-level type of applicant pool enhancement, think about mid-level and higher strategies. There you're looking at partnering with minority and female or diverse professional organizations. And yes, they go beyond just minorities and females. There are a variety of types of professional organizations out there now with whom you can partner to begin to, one, gain a better understanding of how to further diversify your workforce, but two, establish your credibility in bringing some of those folks into your organization. And last but not least, participating in job fairs is still another very, very solid way of advancing the ball in that space. Affinity groups, or employee resource groups referred to as ERGs, have become very, very popular over the past 5 years or so. They are very, very, very useful tools if used correctly. And you'll note here, in referring to affinity groups, stress that they should be aligned with business objectives. Please, as you are crafting your D&I initiatives and programs, by all means, think about creative ways of using and or encouraging affinity and employee resource groups related to your business objectives. These groups should not be opportunities for a gripe session about things that aren't work-related. Their goal should not be to change the world. Their goal should be in helping your company improve its market share and your work environment. Another aspect of your internal workforce that is always useful is providing diversity training for your colleagues in human resources, as well as the line supervisors. Remember, those are the folks who are going to be on the front line making those initial decisions and serving really as the realistic gatekeeper for any effort that you try to put into place, as well as the senior executives who will be evaluating your level of success one way or the other in trying to make the workforce more diverse. All of those folks need to understand and be comfortable with the issues, and participating in the discussion about how to advance your overall effort to diversify your workforce. And one proven way to do that is through diversity training. In communicating the importance of your diversity initiatives, there's no better way of sending that message, particularly to the managers who will bear the lion's share of realistic responsibility of making it happen, than by making diversity a component of the performance management system of your company. Now, I know that will meet with mixed reactions in the audience, depending upon the focus and philosophy of your company. I am not talking about quotas here. Let's be very clear about that. What I am talking about is making sure that the question that is being posed is not how many, quote unquote, fill in the blank persons you have hired. The question should be, what are you, Mr. or Ms. Manager, doing to promote diversity within our workforce? Are you attending the ERG meetings? Are you mentoring a diverse employee? Are you involved in community activities that would expose you to a way of thinking other than your own? Those are the types of things that you can use to, number one, expose your frontline managers to the wealth of talent that may be out there that does not look like them, and two, make your job a whole lot easier in them being able to digest and be willing to digest some of the initiatives that you're going to be putting into place as your program matures. Very quickly, just to kind of to wrap up that segment of the presentation, here is a very, very, very succinct slide on the do's and the don'ts. Do create objectives that relate to development of diverse talent, absolutely, but make them inclusive. Do sponsor and get behind mentoring efforts. Broaden your recruiting efforts. And participation in resource and add resources for affinity groups and liaisons, ERGs. I'm stressing participation there because it is as important for your company to have the group as, well, having your managers participate in the ERGs is as important as it is in having the ERGs or the affinity groups. Don't create objectives that are based solely on numerical goals. Now, I realize that there are some companies out there, and particularly in certain industries, that live and die by the number. I understand that. However, please also appreciate that if you set numerical goals, one, the realistic opportunity and chances of you meeting those numerical goals are very, very small. I've been in this space a long time, and it is rare, even when the company does it exactly right, that you actually hit the exact number that you project you will hit, because there's so many other factors that come into play in this space, ranging from the economy, over which you have no control, market demand or resources going into the company as a whole. Remember, you're talking about business decisions here. And if business was predictable, everybody would be in it. Well, they're not, for a reason. It's not predictable. So you need to be careful with numerical goals. The other reason why you want to stay away from numerical goals is whether you intend it or not, they are easily construed to be quotas, which for the most part in this country are illegal. So Try to stay away from numerical goals if at all possible. If you determine that you can't, make sure that you have people involved in your aspirational goal setting that can help you do it in as sophisticated a way as possible so you reduce your litigation risks. The other don't listed here is don't offer training or development opportunities to diverse employees only. Remember, your goal is to be inclusive. What you're trying to do is to make sure that the slate of people being considered for your leadership and talent programs are diverse. Okay, so let's move now to tracking diversity data. And as I mentioned earlier, this is where the rubber meets the road, if you will. And in light of the time, I'm going to try to move through this quickly, but there are a few things I want to make sure you touch upon. And I think we're now ready for polling question number 3. Heather?
Just waiting for it to pop up. There we go.
Okay.
Does your organization have a diversity council or committee in place? Please select one of the following: yes, no, or unsure. Of the responses, 100% said no. No diversity council or committee in place.
Okay, here we go. Listen up, folks. Break out your quills and parchment. First, you need to have a diversity council or committee of some type. The smaller the better, but here are my suggestions on who needs to be on that diversity committee or council and why. First, you need to have a senior executive, someone either at the CEO or president level, someone in the C-suite of your company. Why? Because he or she will have the authority to make sure that whatever initiatives you come up with in your diversity council or committee are taken seriously. You need to make sure that you have, if your company is large enough, either your diversity professional or some representative from HR or both on your committee or council. You need to make sure that you have a legal representative of some type, whether it's someone from your in-house legal department or an outside lawyer. The reason is because after you collect all of your data, you're going to have to go through an analysis to identify where the opportunities lie for your company. It's analogous to making sausage. What you don't want the outside world to see is what goes into and is ultimately decided upon from the standpoint of how you go about making the sausage. You want them to enjoy the sausage and all the initiatives that you come up with. The only way to protect that is through the attorney-client privilege and the work product privilege or doctrine, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. You should also consider having a marketing person on your committee as well as a business operations person. Marketing, because all of you need to be on the same page with respect to messaging for your diversity and inclusion program and initiatives. You want to have a business person, someone preferably below, one level below the C-suite, because, again, you have to put your finger on the pulse of what your line managers feel they need now and in the future and how to get there. And that business operations person will hopefully be that voice for you. Now, the reason that is important with respect to who is because once you begin to collect or identify the right initiatives, you've got to do so in a way that is going to work for your company. This is probably the second most important aspect of what I'm going to talk about today, and that is making sure that the data upon which you rely in pulling together your program is your data. Not general EEO data, not industry data, but data that reflects the opportunities within your company. Here's why. Very often, the general definitions given to, let's say, manager within the EEO realm will not reflect how your company defines that role. Or, more importantly, how one is promoted. What you may define as promotion, the EEOC or your industry may not. You need to make sure that you're focused on your data from a demographic standpoint, as well as the opportunity to identify opportunities within your company. And there you're going to be looking at hiring opportunities, both internal and external, whether the entry-level area is where you need to focus, or if you're talking mid-career. For example, do you have high turnover within your company? Or is it a low turnover type of company where you need to look at bringing in people at the mid and upper levels of the company as opposed to at the junior level? Always, always, always analyze positions for which diverse slates were unavailable. Very rare in today's market that you cannot find a diverse candidate for a position. The question then becomes how and why those people are not making it through your process, and at what point within your process are they falling out of the process. That's why you need to focus on your company's data and the opportunities presented by that data. To do that in a productive way, you need to have a frank conversation about what your data shows. And that is why you need to make sure that you have in place on your committee and in the collection process, possibly of your data, someone from legal. Okay, that's why you guys need to work as a team, because of the three ways that courts have recognized to protect that information, only one, actually two of the three shown here are effective, and that's the attorney-client privilege and the work product privilege. Very briefly, the attorney-client privilege covers communications between your attorney and his or her client. The work product privilege covers legal strategy and preparation for litigation. The self-critical analysis privilege is basically the do-it-yourself analysis without any color, and I'm using that in quotation marks, of legal strategy or communication being involved. Anything that falls in that third category can be discoverable and will most likely be used by the other side if and when you are involved in litigation as a result. Here are a few things that you should do to protect the privileged analysis portion of your data collection and analysis as long as you can. Determine who will conduct the analysis. Don't let that control you. You should control the data collection. Define the purpose of the analysis in advance and do it in writing. Courts have recognized that analyses in this space done for legal purposes are protectable. They define legal purposes, or the phrase legal purpose, very broadly, but nevertheless it has to be in writing and has to be stated as such. Make sure you control the collection of the data to review the results of the analysis. If you don't control it, and if everybody's in the company is involved, you're going to have a far more difficult time of arguing that it was confidential and that any analysis that resulted from your efforts were protected by the attorney-client privilege or even confidential. Last but not least, you need to make sure that it wasn't used for ordinary business purposes. And again, that will be tied back into using the analysis for legal purposes. Tracking results. The most significant verdict in this space has occurred not because the company failed to do or have the right policies and initiatives in place. It occurred, in my view, because the company failed to follow up. They had all these great policies and they were telling their managers to do this, but no one was paying attention to actually see what the managers were doing. And guess what? the managers weren't doing or following any of the diversity and inclusion policies, and it led to a major, major problem. Here, the first two bullet points are fairly obvious, but I want to share those with you. But I want to focus on the third. When sharing data with your managers, remember, your data is your data. The number of people that you have in your mailroom is 5. 2 of the 5 are whatever you want to fill in the blank with. They're African American, they're Asian, they're gay, whatever. Your data is your data. However, the analysis that you go through to determine that you're going to take the following steps to either improve the demographic composition of your mailroom or expand it, or whatever your goal may be, is not general data and should be protected as often as possible. That is a long way of saying that in sharing data with your managers, you need to make sure that it's data and not analysis. And that is very, very important for protecting confidential information down the road. Now, with that, we're going to take a very, very, very quick glance at what's happening globally, and then I'm going to turn it back over to my gracious host. For those of you who are working with companies that have your headquarters across the pond, or who are headquartered here in the U.S. and doing business in points around the globe, you need to beware. Because diversity, remember the first thing we did was define diversity? Well, the global trends around the world are a little different than ours. It's taken on a worldwide or global approach here. And the trend has been driven by a diverse global marketplace, talent shortages, and companies feeling the need to have diverse talent to understand their diverse customer base better. And believe it or not, folks, the United States of America is not the only country with an Equal Opportunity Act. There are others. Now here, different countries and continents require different approaches to diversity. Simply renaming your diversity office here stateside as Global Diversity Office or officers is a mistake. Without adding the training and the sensitization of those folks to how diversity is handled differently in different parts of the world. Here in North America, we've talked about this. The greater emphasis is on race than in other regions of the world, and we approach it differently. Centralized, quantitative goals, management initiatives. In Europe, however, it's decentralized. Internal persuasion and lobbying, as well as some legislative efforts that all primarily focus on gender, disability, and sexual orientation. In Asia, they take a more laissez-faire approach, and the focus there is on nationality and age, Chinese versus Japanese, as opposed to race. Particularly in Europe, several countries, the Netherlands and others, have taken a legislative approach with respect to requiring a certain number of women, for example, to be appointed to boards. Now, for the last 2 years or so, that's been a very, very active movement over there and has met with some success. Here in the United States, that would be considered a quota, which is not legal. So there's an ongoing debate with respect to, even within parts of Europe, whether or not the legislative path is the way to go. For example, in the UK, in England, they've not quite gone to legislating diversity. They're still in the conversational stage. But in the Netherlands and in other parts of Europe, they have definitely done that. And it is, as I mentioned before, meeting with varied success. So beware, and hopefully on our next time a webinar together, we can focus more on the global issues. with that, I want to thank you for your time. I apologize for going a little bit over, but I will pass it back to my host now.
Great. Larry, listen, thank you so much. You know, all kinds of really good information, lots of changes in the space in a big way, but even more importantly, some key things to be aware of when building out strategy and being cognizant of some of the legal aspects of doing that. It's 1:10 now. We've got about 5 minutes left, and there's a small slew of questions that definitely came up, but I wanted to give you a chance to address one really quickly, if you wouldn't mind, Larry, and then we'll close out our program. One question around the expression of interest systems that you referenced, and the question is there any data or material available about these expression of interest systems and how to really get those off the ground in a tangible way?
I'm not aware of any study or data per se because they vary from company to company, and it's a relatively new idea. But I will certainly keep my ear to the ground, and if the person who posed the question wants to reach out to me, I'll be happy to share whatever on them. But I will say that in my experience, and I've been involved in, let's say, a half dozen situations where companies have adopted those based upon the data within their specific company. They have worked very, very well.
Got it. Will do. I would imagine that there may be some best practices that we can glean where that's concerned. So most definitely, we'd love to be able to share that with the members in general in case there's some broader interest.
Absolutely.
Many thanks, Larry. Great information and really good insight and perspective to keep in mind as folks think through their strategies and how to get the most mileage out of them. In closing, I want to make sure to share with the group a couple of key things to keep in mind where NAR is concerned, and also giving us your feedback about today's webinar. Immediately following this webinar, you'll have an opportunity to complete a really short survey that will take less than 2 minutes. We want your feedback. Please take a moment to share it and give us any insight perspective that would be helpful to us so that we can make these even better on a go-forward basis. Secondly, we absolutely want you to visit our website, www.naraahrnj.org, to learn more about who we are, what we do, even more importantly, what events and or activities are going to be coming up in the short and long term. We'd like you to engage with us. We'd like you to join the organization, and we absolutely want to be able to get your input in terms of topics and activities that will be especially meaningful to you. And finally, I wanted to share with you really 2 events that are coming up. One is this 2014 Employer Branding Conference that Universum is going to be hosting in New York City on May 7th at the Times Center. And NAR New Jersey is a proud sponsor of that conference, and we'd love it if we had representation from New Jersey and our friends or colleagues in that tri-state area join us. It's a conference that they've been doing for over 5 years now. Typically 300 to 400 folks are in attendance, and they've got a really good lineup of speakers from a number of organizations, including E&Y and several others in our area. So you're all most welcome to join if your calendar permits. And if so, as a special guest of NAR New Jersey, you'll get a significant discount on the registration. Just contact us for more details. And secondly, by way of events, we also are supporting the New Jersey OD, or Organizational Development Chapter, in a one-day conference that they'll be doing on May 1st, which is considered National Sharing Day, if you all were not aware. So they will be leading a number of different workshops and having a couple different keynotes on OD-related themes and strategies that your organizations may be interested in. So definitely check out our website or contact NAR New Jersey for additional information about that. So with that said, again, many thanks for joining us today. We loved having you. We love doing these webinars, and we absolutely want to make sure we continue to address hot topics that are important to you, so let us know. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you again. Thanks, everyone.